Good morning, everybody that's on live. I am Coach Campbell, track and field coach, strength and conditioning coach. I'm going to leave it right there, so we're not going any further than that. Every Wednesday, every Wednesday, I go live, do a short training on training volumes and how to monitor them. It's super important to know how to monitor your training volume as an athlete or as a coach, because one, it gives you some really key indicators of what is working and what is not working for you. Things that you can modify, especially during times when you may not have full access to the facilities that you want to have, or for one reason or another, you absolutely can't get to train as often as you want to train. All right. The only way for you to know the volumes that I'm going to discuss is for you to actually journal your training. It's something that I've always advocated for persons. Always monitor your training, always journal your training. Reason being, sometimes it's just some small things that are stopping you from getting that big breakthrough. And if you're not journaling it, you're not going to be able to pick up on those trends. You're not going to be able to pick up on what are the things that you need to change in order to have better training sessions, better recovery, better nutrition, better whatever it is that is holding you back. You're not going to see it because you're not monitoring anything regarding your own training. All right, so I've always been an advocate of monitoring training for the athlete, both on the athlete side and the coaching side, to see, well, how do you get better results for what you're doing? Because the majority of times in programs that are group programs, right? It's just far more efficient for a coach to program using one program for an entire group. And it's not necessarily easy for a coach to be able to monitor everything in terms of what the athlete is doing, how well they are progressing, what they're doing during the training sessions that is working and stuff. But so if you are not monitoring it for yourself, right, to be able to go back to the coach and say, well, coach, we did this, and I realized whenever we do this, my hamstring gets a little bit sore, or my back feels achy, and then I'm not able to do so well the next time. It's kind of rough on you, right? Because you're not necessarily approaching that coaching relationship with the ability to help the coach help you. All right. So every Wednesday we go through training volumes. If you've missed the previous Wednesday lives, here's a quick recap. There are 4 really important training volumes that have to be monitored. First and most important one is your maximum recoverable volume. Maximum recoverable volume is the maximum amount of work that you can do and be able to come back and do an overloading training during the next session, whenever that session is for you, right? So if you are working above that maximum recoverable volume, every single training and recovery strategy or training and recovery principle is, you can throw them out the window. They're not going to help you very much because your body is just not going to be able to recover from the type of work that you're doing. All right. The second most important one is your your minimum effective volume. The minimum effective volume is the least amount of work that you can do and continue to see a measurable improvement in your performance. Right? It's not the how I put it, it's not the sexiest thing in terms of sports training, but it is very, very helpful because as we go a little bit further into today's live, you're gonna find out knowing your minimum effective volume comes in quite handy in times when you're not able to get in as much work as you think you might need to progress quickly. Also, it also helps with the planning for your training so that you can have extended periods of training where you are continuing to improve because you're starting at the correct volume with each cycle. All right. The next most important training volume to monitor is your maintenance volume. And a lot of athletes, when they start monitoring their volume, when they start checking, when they start to actually journal, they realize the maintenance volume is surprisingly low, right? So it takes a lot of work to get to a high level, but it takes far less work in terms of the hours and the intensity and the amount of sessions to maintain what you've gained, right? So it's concept that can save you a lot of heartache and problems because especially, I'll give you an example. Coming around exam times, a lot of people have the idea that, oh, because exams are coming up, I'm going to stop training because I have to focus on my exams. But really and truly, there is a maintenance volume for every athlete, particular to their sport, the uniqueness of their sport or the events that they're competing in, that they can just do that little bit of work and maintain what they've worked so hard for in the previous months, right? So it's a very important concept because at the end of the day, you don't want to work so hard. For example, now we're coming up on the national trials in Jamaica. You work really, really hard coming down, you train past champs and you put in all of this work. And at the end of the day, you're going to miss 2 weeks of or 3 weeks of training because it's exams and you're just doing exams alone. When you could have done the maintenance volume relative or in particular to your sport or your events, and you would have gotten by and been able to compete, not necessarily at your absolute best, right? But well enough to have made the national teams. And then the next, so the fourth most important volume is your maximum adaptive volume, right? The maximum adaptive volume, basically we're just talking about how maximum recovery minimum, yeah. So your maximum adaptive volume is the most amount of work you can do, right? And continue to see improvement, right? So, and this is a key and important concept. Your maximum recoverable volume is higher than your maximum adaptive volume. And you can train above your maximum adaptive volume, right? As long as you're below the recoverable volume, you're basically in the safe zone. You're not necessarily going to progress. You're going to do a lot of work. You're going to be grinding really, really hard in training, not necessarily seeing fast improvement. Because if you're above that maximum adaptive volume, basically what's going to happen is your body's going to prioritize recovery over improvement. All right. So today we're going to focus on the minimum effective volume, right? The importance of the minimum effective volume and how do you tell what your minimum effective volume is? All right, and so for the minimum effective volume, we're basically looking at what is the minimum amount of work that you can do, minimum amount of volume of training that you can do for your sport, for your body, for where you are in your training history, and be able to see a measurable improvement. So you're not necessarily the least amount of improvement, it has to be measurable and it has to be more than what you can attribute to, for instance, for adolescents, more than what you can attribute to growth and maturation, meaning just the fact that they're going through puberty and they're getting a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger with each month or year or whatever. So it has to be measurable, and it can't be so small that you can attribute it to noise or background factors. All right. So if you're talking about 1% gains or 1% improvements, unless you have a very long training history, training for more than 10 years, that's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about significant improvement that you can track and say, well, this is because of my training, not because of any other factor, any other outside factor. All right, so the importance of the minimum effective volume is that it sets certain volume landmarks that are beneficial for you, the athlete, or beneficial for you, for the coach that's writing the program for the athlete. Because at the end of the day, every athlete has to go through cycles where they're loading and when they're unloading, just a little bit, just to allow the athlete to recover. All right. So if you're going through those cycles and you're starting too high at too high of a volume of training, then you have fewer training cycles or fewer microcycles between when you start loading and when you actually are going to either have to plan that deload week or you're forced to deload because of injury, illness, or the athlete just don't feel like training anymore. All right. So it's an important we call it like a backstop to prevent you from losing the athlete, prevent you as an athlete from losing interest in the sport or in training, or to just want to take a break and refresh yourself. All right, so there are some important things in terms of your training volumes, which is that generally speaking, during although this applies more for Olympic sports, you has to have a what we call a background training phase, meaning there's a point in training where you are basically just building up the ability to train at high levels. Now, during that time, the efficiency of your training in terms of how well it is going to be dictated by how intelligently the training is designed. One, to produce learning. Two, to produce okay, yeah, Rory, we'll talk. All right, so to produce learning, and two, to produce improvements, physiological improvement in strength, improvement in speed, improvement in endurance. Now, because you have to have that background phase, the volume is going to be high, but the intensity is going to be low, right? Well, if the volume has to be high in order for you to actually do training that matters, that is going to actually prepare you for the higher level work that you have to do when you get into your competition, then that sets you up a little bit, because coaches have to figure out, right, what that volume is. A lot of the times I can tell you as a coach, we look back at our programs, our previous programs, we look back at the types of athletes that we had, and we set it based on that. But I believe, and this is one of the reasons why I choose to do this type of live presentation every Wednesday at 8 o'clock, that if athletes knew this type of information, they would be able to help the coaches along a whole lot better in terms of, what's going on here, coach. The volume that you prescribe, it is wonderful for me, meaning I am improving at a fast rate, even though I'm not doing so much work. Or coach, the volume that you said, I can't manage it. I'm going into overtraining. I feel like I'm losing motivation, losing sleep, losing my appetite, all the different signs of overtraining, right? So you have to know, you have to have some kind of idea as the coach, where do I start this volume of training? Because it has to be high during the preparatory phase. But how high does it need to be? And I think we are a little bit blinded as coaches, because each generation of kids or adults is a little bit different than the previous ones, meaning that they're born in different things were emphasized while they're growing up, different things are important to them, right? And some of those things affect training because they're spending time doing those things when they're not training with you. So I described earlier the 4 important volumes, right? Well, if you want to see the most optimum improvement, there are 3 of those volumes that have to mesh in what we call a golden triangle. And what that golden triangle is that the minimum effective volume and the maximum adaptive volume, right, form the base and apex of the triangle. And if you think of the triangle like this, with the maximum adaptive volume at the top. That's the fastest you can grow, right, through the training that you're doing in terms of the volume. And the minimum effective volume being the base of the triangle. You want to stay in between those two volumes and fill that triangle up as much as possible. Then you'll have a higher peak when the time comes around for you to compete. Right? So that is what we call the golden triangle in terms of volume ratios. And you want to spend as much time as possible in every single training phase within that triangle, right? Because remember, if you go below it, then you're not actually training enough to see any improvement. And if you train above it, then you're training enough to get really, really tired, but not see the improvement relative to the hours that you're putting in. So you want to stay within that training zone of just below your maximum adaptive volume or at your maximum adaptive volume, but just above your minimum effective volume of training. And the only way to know these things on a personal level, you as an athlete or as a coach, is to sit down and try and map these for the athlete, or in the athlete case, to try and map it for themselves so that you can have important information or feedback that you can go back to your coach with and say, coach, X or Y or Z. If you don't know it, basically, the coach have to know it for you. If the coach don't know it for you, then the tone flying blind. All right. As coaches, as I said before, we do a lot of guesstimation based on what has worked for us in the past and what we think can work for the particular type of athletes that we're training now. But there's a little bit of difficulty with it because if you think about it, there's no way for us to know everything about our athletes, right? For example, you might have an athlete that can't sleep well at night because, gunshot are beating at a constant basis. You're not going to know all the time. A young star athlete don't necessarily want to tell you that him live in a community that is that volatile. So the athlete themselves, if they know how to track it, it works out a whole lot better, right? There are a number of things that affect minimum effective volume. One of them is genetics. There are some people who are just blessed. All right. Shamoy Moody, thanks for joining. Share the live with a friend, Shamoy, so that them can benefit. Antoine, yeah, you, thanks for joining. Caltech 10.5. Big up yourself, athlete. All right. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I learned some stuff today. All right. So there's genetic factors. You hear about some people and them going and as them start lift, so them just start bulk up. There are people who are blessed with genetics that basically chose their parents well. Their minimum effective volume is quite low, and for just a little bit of training or a little bit of specific training, they just improve at a rapid rate. There's nothing to say that something wrong with you if it don't happen to you. It's just a genetics don't matter, and this is all hard work. You need to get your head examined. There are some people who are born with excellent genetics, right? And those people tend to progress quickly, even if they're not training properly, meaning the training program not perfect for them. They are just going to continue to improve regardless. All right. The other thing, so the other factor that affects your minimum effective volume, right? So you can't change genetics, but the muscle fiber type affects your minimum effective volume. One, if you're a speed and power athlete, it doesn't take as much work as most people think in order to see an improvement, right? The reason is the fast twitch muscle fiber, it fatigues very quickly, so high volumes of work are not necessarily conducive to training it, right? But low volumes of work extremely well for training those fast twitch fibers. And the reason is that those fibers tend to need a lot of high intensity exposure to work. So you have to be like fast explosive work and then go rest and make sure that they recover between the sets, recover fully between the sets or near fully, right? Near full recovery between sets work very well for fast twitch muscle fiber. Whereas the endurance type athletes, those athletes can do a lot more repetition of work, but the minimum effective volume for endurance work is very, very high because it takes a lot to overload those muscle fibers. And so we'll buck up on a little nuance in training, which is that your people that have a lot of fast twitch muscle fibers, they increase in muscle strength very, very quickly. So if somebody is a very fast athlete, typically when you take them into the gym, they tend to be stronger than people who are slow. Just naturally, they tend to be stronger. And if they're not initially stronger, then they gain strength faster than people who are slow. That's just a fact of life. That really just has to do with, again, a little bit genetics, because you can't choose how much how much muscle type 1 or type 2 fibers you are born with. You have to just choose your parents better before you were born. Certain muscle fibers tend to be easier to fatigue than others. Some muscle fibers tend to recover faster than others. And so depending on how the fibers are lined up within the muscle and how they attach onto the tendon and also where they attach in terms of the amount of joints that they cross, some of them are just going to be easier to train than others. So for example, hamstring muscles, easily fatiguing. It's very easy to train them and it's very easy to overtrain them because the minimum effective volume for hamstring work is very low. And also the maximum recoverable volume is also super low, right? So you have to be very careful. This is one of the reasons why I have so many hamstring injuries, is because the amount of work that stimulates improvement in hamstring strength is very, very low. And also the amount of work that it takes to overload them is equally low, generally or relatively speaking. All right? Limb length, limb length is the next factor that affects your minimum effective volume. Reason being, tall people are always doing more work for the same amount of external resistance than shorter people. Here's what that means. You define work by the amount of resistance, multiply that by the distance, external resistance by the amount of by the distance that you're moving it, right? So we quantify work that way. So if you think about it, your taller athletes, relatively, so if you have two athletes running 10-2, the taller one at more risk for getting hurt. Always, right? That's an injury risk factor. It means, one, they can continue to improve with far less work. And two, it means they're more likely to get injured for any volume of work that you give them. So you always have to pay attention to your tall athletes, because no matter how much you might think, oh, both two of them running the same time, no. For two athletes, a taller athlete running 10-5 is going to need more recovery, is going to need more assistance to recover. There's actually more wear and tear on their body than a shorter athlete. So while there might be an advantage for the taller athlete, meaning say he has longer strides, there's also disadvantages for him being that tall, right? Because he's always doing more work than the short guy. Gender, I don't want to go into the difficult discussion, because modern day have some difficult discussions concerning gender. But let's just suffice it to say, biological females, right, have a higher minimum effective volume than biological males. So if your genetic material says that you're female, right, then you can do more work, or you have to do more work to get the same amount of training that a male does. You just have to, right? There's no way around that. I don't mean to offend anybody who, whatever you identify, that's on you. Biologically, if you're a male, you're not necessarily having to do as much work to get the same effect, meaning the same volume of training to get the same effect. The primary reason is testosterone, and the utilizing testosterone in males is much higher. So at the end of the day, men produce more power than women, and so it's more wear and tear, and not just that, but because of the intensity of the work, they don't have to do as much volume of training as you would give a female. So typically we can give women more volume, and it doesn't do as much damage. And conversely, you can do, if you have males and females doing the same program, you can give the males less in terms of volume of training, and they will still continue to improve because the minimum effective volume for males is significantly less than for females. And then there are some external factors, what we call the lifestyle factors. So we're talking about nutrition. Athletes with better nutrition actually have lower minimum effective volumes. So put that in some teenage terms. When mommy and daddy are pressure you to eat your fruits and vegetables, then is actually beneficial to you, the athlete. Because at the end of the day, if you are eating properly, if your diet is on point for your sport as an athlete, the minimum amount of training that you can do and still improve is going to be significantly reduced. All right, that's a fact of life. That's biology. Biology doesn't change just because you want it to be different. So the less fast food, the less fatty foods, the less inflammatory foods you eat, and the more nutritious foods that you eat, right? I always say if you look at the ingredients label and it has lots of long words in there, words that you can't pronounce, words that you need a chemistry degree to understand what the hell it is, you're not eating a food, you're eating a food-like substance. And you probably need to take a really close look at your lifestyle, right? The other important things, making sure that you're not training away from training. By that, I mean, you try and make sure that whatever you're doing between training sessions is the least stressful thing that you could be doing, or do it in the least stressful way. The reason for that, your body don't know the difference between training stress and your girlfriend has stressed you out or your boyfriend has stressed you out. Your body can't tell the difference. It just knows that it is being stressed. All right? So those lifestyle factors are super important, because the more poor lifestyle factors you have, is the harder you're going to have to train to get the same result. All right? And the more you clean up your lifestyle around your training, is the lower your minimum effective volume will be. Because pretty much what is going to happen is that the stress that is incorporated in your life, regardless of where it comes from, is actually taking away from the quality work that you can do in training. All right. At this point, we've been on for almost a half hour. I just want to go straight from here so you understand the importance of the minimum effective volume, right? There's a whole bunch more about the minimum effective volume, but if you have any questions right now, would be a good time to ask them, and I can go through and try and give you a proper explanation to help you sort through this stuff. But if not, then we can actually go into how to find the minimum effective volume. And it's actually quite easy. As long as you are tracking, as long as you are journaling your training, it's very easy to find. The minimum effective volume is actually not that difficult. All right. So last week, I think we went through how to find your maximum recoverable volume, because that's the most important one. Second most important, minimum effective volume. Hold on, I need to switch these around. Guys, I'm streaming across a couple different platforms at the same time. Yeah, there we go. Wonderful. All right, so I'm streaming Instagram, kingleo.876, my YouTube page, Coach DuWayne Campbell, if you can find it. All the links to everything is in my bio. And then I'm on TikTok as well, doing the same stream. Just trying to be able to help as many people as I can at the same time. All right, so how do you find your minimum effective volume? Your minimum effective volume is found by actually going through a couple of cycles. All right, what you have to do is, when you're logging your training, you have to go into doing what we call an overloading training, but reducing the amount, the overall volume. So, for example, let's say we're doing strength training, right? Which some bodybuilding type training. Bodybuilders tend to train by increasing the amount of sets of work that they do. So they do a certain amount of reps with every single training body part, and what they'll try and do is increase the sets. So bodybuilders aren't necessarily trying to be the strongest person in the world. They're trying to overload the muscle for it to grow, right? And so that's why they train that way. So a bodybuilder tends to want to keep adding additional sets to overload the muscle. Well, what's going to happen is that the bodybuilder has to hold. So you say, let's say they're working the quads. They're going to do maybe six sets of quads extension or knee extension, leg extension machine each cycle. And they're doing that, yeah, right? Of course, they keep increasing the amount. Hey, too sweet, Jen. Thanks for following. They're doing the minimum. Sorry, they're increasing the amount of weight each microcycle for about 5 cycles, right? And then what they have to do after that is to test it again, right? So you test it before you start that training cycle, right? About 4 cycles, 4 weeks. They're doing how much should I say? So they're doing 6 sets of quad exercise every cycle, every microcycle, every week, right? And so they test it, find out what their multi-repetition max is, how much weight they can move for, let's say, 10 reps of knee extension. So they test it, and then they go ahead and start that cycle. And then they retest it at the end. And what happens is, if they improved in knee extension strength, then basically what that means is that they're above their minimum effective volume. If they didn't improve, then it means they're below it. So what's going to happen is they're going to do another cycle of that same training, right? And if it flips around, meaning now they're able to do more when they retest, then they would be above the minimum effective volume. Or if the first time they tested, there was no improvement from the previous cycle, but then this time there was improvement from the previous cycle, but this time there's none, then they can tell that the previous testing week, thanks for the likes, was the actual minimum effective volume. So what you're trying to find is 1 week where there's no improvement, and then the next week where there is improvement. And when you find that the week that improves after having no improvement, that's your minimum effective volume. Right? That's how you find it. Is basically journal the amount of strength training that you're doing. Test it 1 week, put in your intervention, which is a change in how you train, and then retest it at the end of that cycle to see if there was improvement. All right. And if you don't know how this thing works, if you want an effective tool that will help you in terms of journaling, then if you check the link in my bio, you'll find this nifty little book, Strength Training Journal. This is my publication. It comes in the hardcover, right? Hardcover with all of the things printed in there. that you can use to journal your training. There's also a soft cover version of it, a little bit cheaper, right? The only difference between them is, oops, the hardcover is a little bit sturdier, right? So for myself, I use the hardcover version. It's a little bit more expensive. And journal it. Journal what you do in the weight room, right? And you will be able to see these patterns emerge. All right, just a quick recap on why it's important to know your minimum effective volume. One, it allows you to train, to do overloading training for a longer period of time before you have to deload or unload. That keeps you in training mode longer than your competitors, meaning you continue to see improvement longer than your competitors, right? And that is important for an athlete because invariably at some point you have to deload. But if you're able to catch the volume landmark, that minimum effective volume, accurately and start ramping up your training or start loading up from the real minimum effective volume, then you're going to be able to train for longer, train more efficiently, and have more training sessions where you can get in your technical work for your sport, right? Without any disruption or with minimum disruption. So it's super important to know. I know, like when I learned about it, I was like, what is this? Why would I want to learn at the slowest rate? Why do I want to improve at the slowest rate? But it's actually a strategy that most advanced athletes and coaches use to improve the overall effectiveness of the training, right? So the other important factor is there, whenever you're injured, whenever you have to miss training, like you don't have a choice in the matter anymore, you actually have to miss training because of some external event, right? Or you have to reduce the amount of training because the training venue is not as accessible to you anymore. You can set your mind at ease because you would know how much work or how little work it takes to continue to improve. All right. And this is not to say that you must train at the lowest amount of volume of work all the time, because remember, the minimum effective volume is a slow improvement, and athletes don't want the slow improvement. You want to improve as quickly as you possibly can without putting yourself at risk for injury or illness. Right? So under any normal circumstance, a competitive athlete wants to go at the fastest possible rate. He wants to train somewhere around his maximum adaptive volume. But again, if you don't know what these things are, if you don't know how to track them, and if you don't know what affects them, then you're kind of behind the eight ball, meaning you're kind of at a disadvantage as an athlete or as a coach, because this is the advanced stuff that is used when people say, oh, you have to do certain illegal things in sports in order to make it to the top. It's not true. It's just that some people don't know what you actually have to do, right? Or they're in a situation where they're not able to do it because they don't have the facilities available to them, right? In that case, I say find somebody that knows how to help you, or find yourself in a situation where the facilities are available. But again, you have to know how to track these things. And I've given you a pretty simple formula. You test whatever variable it is that you're trying to improve. You reduce the volume significantly, right? And go through a couple cycles, maybe 3 cycles of loading and then 1 unloading cycle, and then you retest the thing. So if it's speed that you're trying to improve, then you're going to reduce your speed training significantly, right? For about 3 cycles. And then you're going to retest at the end of it. How fast did you get? Did you get any faster? Did you get slower? Right? And that's how you know. It seems simple enough. Most people don't go through these type of things to see, well, what is happening here? What is working and what is not working? All right. I'm not seeing any questions. And I love questions, but I'm not seeing any. If there are no questions, then we can move forward because it's getting into my work time now. Guys, I come on and I do these lives for you early in the morning. I know a lot of people are not quite up when I start the live, but it's the time I have available. All right. Maybe at some point in the future, what I'll do is I'll just do like a Zoom session and allow people to sign up for it at a time that's at a more convenient time. But 8 o'clock to about 8:45 is the time that I have available to put this information out there for people, for anybody who might benefit from it. So here we are. Hopefully you guys have learned some important things that can help you with your training. Again, I'm Coach Campbell. I'm on here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Monday, we talk about recovering from training and how to structure your recovery. Right? On Wednesday, we talk about the training volumes, the actual training volumes, and helping athletes to learn why they're important and how to monitor them and how to log them. And on Friday, we talk about the nutrition, specifically about nutrition aspect of your training and how to maximize that so that you can improve at the fastest possible rate. So, yeah, Dre Kayla Mommy on TikTok, thanks for joining. You catch me at the end of the live, but follow so that you can get a notification the next time. Dope081. Yeah, man, respect. Thanks for joining the live. And just give me a follow on TikTok since that's the platform you're on, and turn on notifications so that the next time I go live, you can hop on quickly because you get a notification of it. All right, whenever I'm going live, is always to teach you something that will help you to improve as an athlete or as a person that is working out. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining. Remember to follow me on whichever platform you're viewing this on. And I will see you again on Friday when we talk about the nutrition aspect of your training and how that helps with recovery and what to do, how to maximize the nutrition aspect of your training and performance. All right. Have a great day, and I'll see you again on Friday.